As I've already demonstrated in previous films, such as An Inconvenient 9/11 Truth Part 2, and in recent again, with World Trade Center bombing of 1993, Hidden Path to 9/11, Crimes, Cover-Ups, and Missing Links, that after the 1993 bombing, when fugitive Ramzi Youssef and other conspirators, including his uncle, alleged future 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, fled from the Philippines after Youssef's apartment caught on fire while making bombs, where Youssef then sent his friend Abdul Hakim Murad to retrieve his laptop but was captured by Philippines authorities, where subsequently terrorist plans were discovered in the laptop with the code name Bojinka. As you may recall what the colonel of the Philippines National Police, Rudolfo aka Boogie Mendoza, said from his interrogation of Murad that he believed that the later phase of the Bojinka plans was the blueprint of 9/11. Where U.S. officials have only dared to say that 9/11 was only inspired by the Bojinka plot, and that in fact it would have been too large of a scale of an operation to pull off, this being later backed up by statements with KSM complying that the operation could only handle 4 planes and the absence of explosives. This all in happenstance to yet having not been able to find direct evidence of him working under the behest of Osama bin Laden and the Al-Qaeda network ordering the attacks, as the FBI never had OBL wanted for 9/11, only terrorist attacks committed prior around the world, specifically USS Cole and East Africa embassy bombings. But there's a few other myths we need to address here that have been promoted not only by the fringes of the right-wing conspiracy theorists, but also on the left of mainstream media. One of the other myths that we must dispel, which I've already done so in my previous film, 6 on 77, the Dulles Airport 9/11 cover-up, is that the authorities had all 19 hijacker names and identities the following day after 9/11, which is still a commonly held belief in the 9/11 truth movement. But this is simply not the case. As you may recall, John Ashcroft in his first press conference after 9/11, at around 3:45 p.m., he had no names or precise number of hijackers, only that there was a ratio between 3 to 6 hijackers on a plane.
The 4 planes were hijacked by between 3 and 6 individuals per plane.
But following this, Robert Mueller also spoke as to giving a summary of how federal agents were carrying out the nationwide dragnet pertaining to what details they had to them based off the flight manifest.
In the last 24 hours, we have been addressing 2 objectives. The first objective is to identify the hijackers on each of the planes. Having identified the hijackers on each of the planes, we then have sought to identify any of their associates remaining in the United States. Our first effort is to identify any associates in the United States who might be related to the hijackers and to remove those associates, investigate, and arrest, given the evidence, those individuals, and to remove any threat to the air system in the future. That is our first objective. The second objective is to gather any and all evidence we have as to whom assisted the hijackers, and not only in this country but also overseas. We also have identified through a number of leads, principally at the cities of origin, a number of individuals whom we believe may have had something to do with the hijackings, and we are pursuing those leads aggressively.
Aside the signs of anomalies with 3 to 6 hijackers and using the flight manifest as an evidentiary base rather than confirmation, being that eventually, or as the story goes, there is supposed to be 4 to 5 hijackers who had simply boarded using their real identities and easily found on the manifest, with their names, passenger, and seat numbers. But separate from what's potentially covered up about the official hijackers boarding or weapons used on the planes, it's obvious federal authorities were worried that the 9/11 hijackers had associates still out there who may have posed a future threat. And just about an hour later, Norman Mineta held a press conference at the Department of Transportation.
Now, effective immediately, I have directed the Federal Aviation Administration to reopen on a limited basis the nation's commercial airspace to allow flights and passengers who were diverted yesterday to be able to continue on to their original destinations. Only passengers on the original flights will be allowed to reboard under strict security, and only after airports and airlines have implemented strict screening measures. I have also directed that the FAA temporarily extend the ground stop order that was imposed yesterday while additional security measures are being completed and we continue to assess any potential threats.
But there's a particular detail about the Bojinka plan that needs to be underlined as likely being an additional reason for such a warning sign for other suspects other than what we already know with Flight 23 at the moment. Because although there are being different versions and dates for the Bojinka plot, it's also known to be the 48 hours of terror, indicating that it would be 2 days worth of attacks. And as all U.S. airports remain closed for well over 24 hours since the attacks with the FAA's no-fly ban, the U.S. was basically shut down for 2 entire days, as the rumor was that airports were supposed to be open sometime on September 12th, 9/12. And while most were still in shock, grieving and angry for the past 2 days safe at their homes, thousands of travelers didn't have that luxury, as they in fact had been stuck for nearly 2 days outside U.S. airports in makeshift shelters, desperately wanting to get back home safely or to their final destination, while all inbound coming flights that were supposed to arrive in the U.S. were diverted to Canada and other neighboring territories where those travelers also suffered similar consequences. Which brings us to one of the bigger myths that needs to be addressed before we roll into September 13th. It's the claim infamously promoted by Michael Moore and embraced by many in the 9/11 truth movement, in his 2004 movie Fahrenheit 9/11, that while all commercial civil aviation was grounded, the entire bin Laden family that resided in the U.S. was able to fly out of the country the next day. Although the 9/11 Commission report states they found no evidence of political intervention, that anyone in the White House above the levels of National Security Council participated in any decision on the departure of Saudi nationals. The President and Vice President told us that they were not aware of the issue at all until it surfaced much later in the media. This here is a photo taken from September 13th with Bandar Bush bin Sultan, President Bush, Cheney, and Condoleezza Rice, and Bandar's aide Rihab Massoud on the White House balcony, where Bandar is speaking in regards to getting the bin Laden family out of the U.S. safely, rather than what some have tried to suggest that it's them having a congratulatory cigar. No evidence that any flights of Saudi nationals, domestic or international, took place before the reopening of national airspace on the morning of September 13, 2001. But as airspace reopened, 9 chartered flights with 160 people, mostly Saudi nationals, departed from the United States between September 14th and 24th. Much of this has been covered on other articles charting what exact flights were shuttled before departing the continental U.S. But there's a good reason for these bin Laden family delays, still even after airports become reopened on the 13th, which we are about to go into next.